Well, hello, good afternoon, everybody, and you're very, very welcome to the International Master Course virtually at the National Concert Hall. While, of course, we're very saddened that we can't run the Master Course in person this year, we are nonetheless delighted to have assembled our stellar cast of tutors, and we have a busy program of events, seminars and masterclasses this week. So please do look at our website, nch.ie, under the International Master Course to find the full schedule of events. Of course, we are delighted to welcome in this first session our two artistic directors, Gwendolyn Mason and Finghin Collins. And this first event is a seminar with Finghin Collins, introduced by Gwendolyn Mason. You're both very, very welcome. And Gwendolyn, I will now hand over to you for the session.
Thank you very, very much, Nigel. It's a pleasure to be able to welcome you to the first seminar of the National Concert Hall's International Master Course today, and I will be having the great privilege and pleasure of speaking to a hugely admired pianist who happens to be a very dear friend of mine, Finghin Collins. Just before I tell you a little bit about Finghin Collins, I'd like you to know that this seminar will be followed by a question and answer round, and that if you're watching this on either the YouTube live chat or on the Facebook live chat, you can submit any of your questions there and we will try to get to them as much as possible. So in brief, a little bit about Finghin. Finghin is one of Ireland's most successful musicians. Finghin's international career was launched by winning first prize at the Clara Haskell International Piano Competition in Switzerland in 1999. He has performed in recital and with major orchestras, throughout Europe, the States, the Far East and Australia. In October 2017, the National University of Ireland conferred on him an honorary degree of Doctor of Music. Finghin has recorded numerous award-winning CDs for Swiss label Clavis over the past 2 decades, including works by Schumann, Stanford, Chopin and Mozart. He is Artistic Director of Music for Galway since 2013 and also founding Artistic Director of the New Ross Piano Festival. Finghin, that is an incredible CV. Thank you for sitting through that and listening to it.
Thank you.
It is a great pleasure to host you here today on a topic I think you are more than equipped to talk in detail about. But before we get going, Finghin, how are you?
I'm very well, Gwendolyn, and it's nice to see you. I'm sorry that we're not all together in Dublin at our International Master Course. I'm having great memories of last year's event with all the students bustling around and classes going on in adjacent rooms and lunches and dinners and so much learning and playing going on. But we're doing our very best. We're very grateful to the National Concert Hall to have arranged for us to have these online sessions all this week, and this is the first one. And it's lovely to be here. And thank you, Gwendolyn, to you for hosting this event. I hope to return the favour during the week.
Thank you. I'll look forward to it. You've chosen to help us talk about a very, I would say it's more than important. It's a pressing and important question for sure. It has to do with how we as musicians can continue a career or even begin a career, shall we say, aside from the sheer act of practicing, of music making, of learning our trade, there is all of what happens afterwards. You are an exemplary model of that. You play, you teach, you artistically direct. I think that it would be fair enough to say that you are having what they call nowadays a portfolio career. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? How do you manage to juggle all these different roles?
Well, I think that's what keeps me going is the diversity within the different roles, and one feeds into the other. And even within the performing career, to do a mixture of playing with orchestras and playing solo recitals and playing chamber music, each one feeds the other. People say, which do you prefer? And I always say, well, I don't, want to really focus on any one particular type of music making because each one inspires the other. But similarly, playing, I don't do much teaching, but I do a little bit of teaching. And as you say, being artistic director of Music for Galway, New Ross Piano Festival, and our master course here as well. These roles also inspire hugely my playing, and my playing feeds in very much to them. So it's all one big circle. When I travel and perform, I hear a lot of people. I discover wonderful people, and it's a wonderful honor to be able to invite people then to Ireland to perform in whatever series I might be able to invite them to. So it's all linked up. And what I think is fascinating, and the reason I suggested this theme for this chat we're having today, is I think it's fascinating how each individual musician has to learn to build really their own career, to develop it and to keep it going as well. Because you might be doing extremely well, say in your early mid-20s, you might have loads and loads and loads and loads and loads of concert engagements, but then it might dry out for some reason, maybe when you're, I don't know, 27, and then what you do. So it's knowing your strengths, being able to diversify, being able to play to your strengths, and when, as I say, if one element starts to go a bit slow, what can you do to rev it up, so to speak? How can you make sure that you're doing all in your power to ensure that you will be asked back? For example, if you give a concert in a new location, while it's not our prerogative to expect ever to be asked back to a series where we perform or a festival, we have to do all we can to make the best impression in every way. And I think a lot of young musicians can do with leadership and guidance and inspiration, and just thinking really about where they want to be, why they're making music, and it's really a matter of remaining open to having one's antennae constantly twitching for opportunities, for ways to kind of go sideways into a different path, maybe to take up conducting, for example, as a lot of musicians do. I'm not saying everybody has to do that, but that's one example. And I think a lot of people say who are 17 or 18, and we all did, they think, well, if I do my 7 hours a day practicing, I'll have a glittering concert career, until I drop dead when I'm 85 or whatever. And I think there's a lot more to it than that. We can talk, maybe, if you like, about different planks that we set up to get ourselves into a successful career. We can talk about competitions, we can talk about master classes, we can talk about study, and we can talk about so many different ways there are. What fascinates me is how each single musician, whatever instrument they play, ends up carving out in different ways a whole portfolio of a career. It might be a mix of teaching, of singing, of you might get into music therapy, you might have a very, very busy performing career, you might start a new festival. There are just so many ways to make a living in music. Of course, most of them have come to a grinding halt now because of the pandemic, but there are such a myriad of ways to make a living, to make a life, to make a career in music, and not every kind of activity suits everybody. I mean, some people want to travel the world constantly and live out of a suitcase, and that's the only life they know. Other people do that for a few years and get very tired of it. They have a family, they might want to do much less teaching, they look for a teaching job, and then they do much less performing, and much less traveling and performing, and they try to base themselves in one particular geographical area. Other people carry on like that forever. Other people maybe develop some kind of stage fright and want to do much less performing and think, oh, I've done that now, I've scratched that itch, I just want to go local. So that's what fascinates me, is the different ways there are. And you're another example of that, Gwendolyn, how you've built up your career and in Switzerland, and how you've also started the Gaia Festival, you teach in Geneva, you perform all over the place. So you've developed also a very, very successful way of promoting your activities. You're very good at the online stuff, which again is something we can talk about. Self-promotion, self-management, management agencies. There's so many different elements to the career of a musician these days. So I don't know where you'd like to start.
Well, thank you very much, first of all, for your kind compliments. I have to say that, not that you asked me the question, but if you had asked me why I do so many things, it's because I find it very hard to stick to just practicing. It's something I would have done a lot of, obviously, as a child and as a teenager, and I would suggest you would have done much the same.
Yeah.
And this is a question I'd like to ask you. I developed a certain sense of loneliness from being on stage on my own a lot. And the chamber music opportunity didn't come. I mean, of course, I played a lot of chamber music, but to seriously follow a chamber music trajectory didn't come to me until I was in my late teens.
Mm.
Because all the study you do on, for instance, the violin is so intensive. The repertoire you learn as a
Of course.
soloist takes so much time, there isn't much space left to do chamber music. And from chamber music, then my interest was piqued in all kinds of other areas, from chamber music to performance and teaching and so on. What was that like for
Yeah.
you? I mean, as a pianist, if I thought my life was lonely, I can only imagine how you might have felt. Having said that, you mightn't have been lonely at all. It is a question of
Yeah.
type as well. But pianists often don't have the access to youth orchestras that other instrumentalists might have, for example. So what was
Absolutely, and
you
yeah,
as a young?
it is a like, and people often say the life of a pianist can be a very solitary one. Now, I was lucky growing up because I also played the violin for many years, and I played in youth orchestras, and I had that experience, which was fabulous, and stood to me as when I then went on to play a lot of concertos with orchestras and even do some conducting and do a lot of directing. To know how string instruments work has been very useful. So I had that communal experience, but it's interesting what you say about that you want about practicing and how you didn't want to spend all your life practicing. And I subconsciously, I suppose that's also been an element as to why I've got into so many other things. And putting, just for me, and I think for you too, putting together programs and not always, and getting out of one's own instrument. I think it's really important that we all, and for any young musicians watching this, that they think beyond their instrument. That that I love to put together programs where it's got a Brahms string sextet finishing it, and it starts off with the string trio, and it's there mightn't be any piano involved. To me, music is music, and I just happen to play the piano. That's my way of expressing, and I could just as easily, you know. Be quite as happy to play the clarinet or the cello or whatever. I just think music is what we an opera just and I watched a lot of operas over the last few months. um I think each musical genre feeds the other one, and it's so important. I often say if you want to play a Mozart piano concerto, you have to know his operas. You want to play Beethoven, you have to know his string quartets. So I would urge any young musician watching this to don't just think within your own instrument, but think beyond your instrument. Listen to music from all different. Listen to Baroque music, listen to contemporary music, and beyond music, even read a lot. Young musicians often forget that the music that they're learning and studying and practicing so assiduously is actually there to communicate some message in the same way that a novel or a poem or a play or a film is. And so we need to be consuming all this stuff. So it's not just about getting from the beginning of the piece to the end, playing all the right notes in all the right order quickly. But it's for me what's so crucial and is often overlooked by young musicians is the message behind the music. What is the composer saying? What is the music expressing? And what do the audience want to get from this experience? And how do we communicate to our audience? And how do we make ourselves a channel of the composer's wishes? All of these things, I think, are really important to think about, because we can get really wrapped up in our own instrument, and we can become very channeled and in almost what's the word, blinkered in that way. And I think it's really important that we keep our eyes and ears open to all kinds of, as I say, to other instrumental music, to other genres, pop music, all kinds of stuff. And just, I believe everything can influence us. And we don't have to like everything. We can say no, and that's just not for me. But I think we should be, and I say this, I could have also probably even done more of trying other kinds of music and being more open to differences and different influences. So I think the more open we can be, the better.
So let's go back to 1999,
Mm,
which some might see as the big bang of your career really taking off. I personally would disagree because I know you since we're just young.
mhm,
And from a very young age, you were seen as being Ireland's big talent as far as piano playing goes. And I think that hasn't
mm,
changed much. Of all the great Irish pianists currently working, I would say that your name would slot in very quickly, together with, for example, Barry Douglas,
mm,
or indeed your own teacher, John O'Connor, or Hugh
mm,
Tinney. I mean, this is an
mm.
illustrious gallery, and Ireland is lucky, I think, to have such amazing keyboard specialists. particularly because all of you lead international lives and all of you play beyond the Emerald Isle. And you would have won every competition going in the country from a very young age on. You were an outstanding student at school. You were amongst the highest achievers in the Leaving Cert, which I hear hasn't taken place this year in Ireland. What I'm trying to say with that is that you must have had a very broad and open awareness and keen excitement to learn from a young age, to take things in. So, literally speaking, that your brain really was that sponge that people talk about with young children. Having said that, you're a pianist, you're going to all these competitions, you're spending hours with your instrument on your own in solitude. And then 1999, the Clara Haskell competition in Switzerland, where you were studying at the time. And then what happens? Do suddenly 200 concerts a year materialize and fall in your lap, and do you just sit back and sort of go, well, that's been that then? And then is that what happens, or is that the reality of it? Is that what we can sort of aspire to, or does the reality look slightly different?
Well, it's slightly different. I mean, 1999 was a really good year for me, not only because of the Clara Haskell competition, but also I made my debut at the Wigmore Hall in London. I made my debut with the National Symphony Orchestra in Dublin in the main season. I finished my studies in Dublin, and I started studying in Switzerland. The competition success was certainly a big help to my career. But it gave me a really good relationship with Claves Records, the Swiss record company for whom I still record CDs, as you mentioned earlier. It gave me numerous engagements around the world. I'd say maybe it wasn't like 100 or anything. It was maybe about 20. So it wasn't massive, but some of them were really got me in with really good orchestras like the City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra and the Rotterdam Philharmonic, and playing concertos with these orchestras was amazing. And then some of them had me back. So what I think the real challenge is that, like you say, you can't just sit back and say, well, that's it now, I've got my concerts for the rest of my life. You get a competition is an opportunity given to you on a plate, and you really have to do all in your power to be ready for it. I mean, you have to win it. First of all, you have to be lucky enough to win it at the right stage, that you're ready to take on the challenge. There are cases of people who've won competitions when they're 17 and they're just not ready to play all these concertos and to be all of a sudden live on radio and to deal with the stresses that brings. I was 22, so I was a little bit better prepared maybe than that. Still young, but I had to really make sure that a lot of those engagements didn't just die, and that they led to other things. The CD was really useful that came out of the competition, because it was my first CD, so it was like a calling card. It was like a business card that I could present to promoters and say, look, this is me. And just the competition is highly regarded, and I've managed to maintain a really good relationship with the people who run the competition. So it looks like I'll be a member of the jury of the competition next year. So what I'm trying to get to is how important it is for young musicians, when they have some success, is to harness that success as well as they can, without being sort of cloyingly intense about it. But it's a knack we have to have as musicians of holding on to relationships and of nurturing those relationships, of knowing how to stay in touch with people who have the power to give us engagements without overdoing it, without irritating them and writing to them every month saying, when's my concert? But yes, staying in touch and saying, look, I've just done this, and you might be able to come and hear me there, or here's my latest CD, here's a really interesting program proposal. But I think we all have to find the way of doing that, as I say, does us the best service and keeps our career going.
Hold on a second. You talk to me like somebody who is very hands-on. I happen to know you, and I know that you're somebody who's extremely disciplined and you work very, very hard. But what about that dream of winning that competition, and then an agent comes up to you or a manager and says, I want to sign you, I think you're great. And then you sign to a management company, and then there's this expectation from many youngsters to go, well, now I've won the competition, I have a manager, and sort of the sit back and relax thing. Would you agree that that can work for many, or do you actually think that it is of great benefit if a musician is willing to reach out to their audience and to people individually and actively?
Well, I think more and more we have to be hands-on. I mean, that happened to me, because after winning the Clara Haskell, I was signed up by Asconnus Holt in London, and they were my managers for 5 years. And things went well. They found me engagements. They kept things going. But I had to do it. A lot does come back to the artist in the end. I had to, I'm the product they're selling, so I have to be the product that they want to sell. I have to be at the other end of an email if they want to ask me to we've got you this possible invitation. You have to, no musician, I mean, unless you're some enormous superstar, no musician can be hands off and just leave it all to be run by offices somewhere out there. Like we all, and you're very hands on too. It all comes back to us in the end. We are the product, as I say, that's being sold, and we are the person who turns up in the concert hall. It's the impression that we give, and when we get to our concert engagement, have we irritated the promoter? Have we changed our program 4 times in the last 3 months? Have we arrived late on the train? Have we suddenly arrived with our girlfriend or boyfriend in tow and haven't told the promoter that they're staying over and you're not paying? Who's going to pay that extra night? Have we, do we turn up late to our rehearsal? Do we suddenly demand the piano be tuned to 449? We have the agent is selling this product, but we are the product, and we have to make sure that we don't act the proverbial, that we actually, not only do we have to play well, and that's super important, don't get me wrong, that is the most important thing, our playing, but, unless you're an absolute demigod, you have to also sort of behave relatively nicely. People have to say, God, he was a cool guy. He just came. He did a really good concert. There was no messing. He didn't mess us around. We'll have him back in 2 years. That's the kind of thing you want to have happen. But if you kind of turn up and you're sort of looking like you've come off the back of a bus and you haven't got, you're not haven't showered, or if you leave any kind of, if I've just given 7 examples of a bad impression you can give, and there are probably 17 more. But I'm just saying, an agent is great, and I've had management for the last whatever number of years, and I've had different management. But an awful lot of engagements come through your personal connections, through people who click with you, a conductor who works with you and say, this guy is really, really on the button. He communicates beautifully. He knows how to play Mozart, and then that conductor, no matter what agent you're assigned to, that conductor can then get you an engagement with an orchestra that he works with in Spain or in America or whatever. And then the agent, follows up and gets all these details through. So, but my point is, it comes back to the artist, and it comes back to us, to be hands-on and to be aware, and to be aware of other people, and to communicate not only as a musician but as a person, and not mess people around.
I would totally agree. So how do I know as a musician what sort of, let's call it, just for the sake of argument, add-on I want to do? So let's say I play the clarinet. And that's my thing, and I'm very good at it. And how do I know whether I want to try to follow the solo path or the chamber music path? How do I know whether I ever want to dabble in conducting? What would happen if I were to switch sides and decide that I want to do some management of my own? For example, I want to set up a label, and I want to represent other artists who I deeply admire, and I want to, for example, say to them, look, well, rather than doing another Beethoven, I'd like you to record something very special and do this. How do I know, and at what point can I figure out what other diversity I might be able to dive into?
Well, God, that sounds like a fabulous career, that clarinet person, whoever they are. Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I think it's 2 things. First of all, I don't know what ancient Greek philosopher said, know yourself. We have to know ourselves. We have to know our strengths. We have to know our weaknesses. We have to know whether the really high stress, performing live on radio, performing live at the proms, these really stressful events, is it for us constantly? Do we want that? Do we want to play first clarinet in a symphony orchestra, which is also an amazing thing to do? You play the most amazing music and you work with the most amazing conductors. And I often think of that position, which pianists can't really have. Setting up a record label is like something you might do in your 40s when you get a bit of capital behind you or investment. So there's knowing yourself and knowing, am I good at this? I mean, you have to know, some people are hopeless administrators and they just do the minimum email, and they just look at their emails once a week and they reply late. And that person is not going to be, somebody who's going to be able to, or is going to enjoy getting into any kind of administrative role, be it programming a festival, running a CD label, because they're just not good at, doing an Excel sheet, attaching it to an email and sending it in on time. They just want to sort of live, dreamily, and maybe write a bit of music and then play a concert, and that's fine. But so we have to know our own strengths and weaknesses. I mean, I like all that kind of stuff that I've just talked about. A bit of I think. but the other thing, the other element is timing and luck and what comes along. I mean, I was very lucky, for example, with the Music for Galway position. I had just finished 3 years as what was I called? Associate artist of the RTE National Symphony Orchestra. They asked me to be associate artist for 3 seasons, which was an amazing privilege, from 2010 to 2013, where I played all the Mozart concertos with them and all the Beethoven concertos, and we commissioned stuff, and we had an amazing time. And that wound up in 2013, and exactly at that time, this position at Music for Galway came up that I applied for and got. And it wasn't sort of a big decision. I sat down and said, I'm going to do 3 years of work with the orchestra, and then I'm going to start this job. It wasn't planned. There's a lot of luck, I think, and chance as well in careers, and being in the right place at the right time. But when the orchestra work dried up, well, my income went down severely, and I just taken on a mortgage, and luckily this Music for Galway work sort of slid in and gradually came to replace that income, and then the position developed, and I'm still doing it. I would not have thought that I'd be still doing it 7 years later. So I think, yeah, it's knowing your strengths and weaknesses, playing to those, developing them if possible. And I'm not the same person now that I was 20 years ago. So developing in different ways, if you feel that way, and then being in the right place at the right time. But another thing I'd say is, like, in order to, people say, oh, well, how can I be lucky? I just sit here. But in order to be in the right place at the right time, I'm going to go back to something I said earlier, because it's really important, and that is being open. And so, people say, oh, well, nothing ever happens to me. Nobody ever invites me to play a concerto. But if you're not out there, like if you don't go to stuff, and one of my really big bugbears in life, which I have said before and I'll say again now, is music students don't go to enough concerts. Okay, there are no concerts on now much, but let's not talk about now. Students have to go. They should be going to symphony concerts every week. They should be going to chamber concerts every week. They should be going out there, meeting people. They should be out there. And now we have, we didn't have Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and YouTube growing up. Thank God, in a way, because we would have done less practice, I guess. But nor did we have that opportunity of promoting ourselves. We have to be out there in order to have these, to be lucky in a way. We have to be seen. We have to be out there. We have to be open. We have to be open to if somebody says, if you're a student and you're a pianist and you're playing your Prokofiev sonatas, and some young singer says, let's try out a Schubert song cycle, and you think, oh, no, I'm a solo pianist, I'm not going to bother doing that. Like, that's the wrong decision. You need to be doing that. You need to be playing leader as a pianist. You need to be playing chamber music as early as possible. You need to be playing with people, developing all those aspects of your persona, and one, as I keep saying, one feeds back into the other. So that's how luck happens in a way. We make our luck by being open.
I couldn't agree more. So what do I do if, for example, and I'm potentially talking about myself here, it's the end of a concert and I've been invited to some reception afterwards, but potentially not during Corona. And I'm now in a room full of people who could make decisions about the next steps in my career, but I am potentially quite shy. How can I engage in conversation with people who I don't potentially know, but they might know me because they just came to the concert? Is there something that we can go out there to say? I mean, it's a very fine line between being too strong when we start talking to people to engage them, and being too soft or too shy or too introspective about, the courage to speak up, which is something actually that runs also into the whole question of what we're worth, the worth of a musician, which is this huge topic now and anytime. Everything from the devaluation of music, because everything is so freely and widely available to us. But let's go back to that room in which an artist might find themselves surrounded by promoters or interested public and audience. How can we engage and yet somehow get over the shyness that might come with being a performer and being in different countries with different cultures, not really knowing how to be?
That's a tough one, because I've never been particularly shy. I've always been sort of outgoing in that sense. And so, and I often find that as the performer, if you've performed and then you're in a reception afterwards, they all come to you, and because you've been on stage, and they come over, and but I know exactly I've been in situations that you also described where you're in a room and you think there are people in this room, and maybe it's not a night where I perform myself, but I've been at a concert, and people, I know there are people who could be really useful to my career, and they don't know me, and you're thinking, well, I go up and say hi, I played the piano, or how do look at me, and that's really difficult, and in those situations I can be also shy, and it's tricky, and the only way, like, that I can think of right now offhand, is to have somebody who can introduce you, because it's really difficult to go up yourself, unless you've got some in and you can say, you know, I heard you play, or if it's a musician, and you make some link to the person, and you put your best side forward, and you make a connection to the person that way. If you have somebody with you, it doesn't have to be a manager; it can just be a friend or somebody who might know the other person who can introduce you. But it's tricky, and every situation is very different. In those situations too, it can be handy to have CD recordings sort of in your handbag or back pocket that you can slip to people, because that's like as somebody said before, it's like a visiting card. It's like a calling card that you give, and then the person who mightn't remember meeting you will go home and find this CD in their bag, and they might listen to it, and you might get something from it. So it's a really fine balance that I'm coming back to again and again, because there's nothing worse than being too pushy. And I have, as somebody who promotes a lot of recitals, in Galway and to a lesser extent in New Ross, there's nothing worse than a pushy artist who writes to you every single month with a new proposal. I mean, it needs to be done in such a careful way, so that you're persistent without being annoying, that you get the balance right. Those are the things that every human being has to judge for himself and herself, just to get the balance right, because we have to promote ourselves. And there are so many musicians out there. There's so much talent there, and it's difficult for everyone to make a performing career. But that's why I'm excited by all the different ways there are of making a really exciting career, where, as I say, and so many musicians, I mean, almost every musician that I know of my generation has some kind of festival or series, or starting something, and has found a church that they adore and want to put concerts on there. And, that's wonderful, I think. And that takes the power, so to speak, from big, huge promoters, agencies, who in the past have been maybe too powerful, and it gives more power back to us. So we can just say, well, no, I want to play in that church, and I want to have him and her and him and her, and we're going to play this repertoire because I love those pieces, and that's what we're doing, and we don't need anybody to invite us. So that's very empowering, and I think more and more that's what artists are doing. Is they're starting their own festivals.
It's very positive and extremely, you very much sound like an enabler, and I think that's something we all need more of. This feeling of being able to do these things, of being a sort of a universe unto ourselves, who are actually able to take charge of what way our lives will go as musicians and what paths we will follow. You speak about being able to control the message, basically. What program is being played? What pieces are you choosing to play? What are you choosing to come on stage and conduct Mozart yourself while you play, or is it going to be a conductor, and all of these sort of things?
Yeah,
Which is wonderful and indeed empowering. You spoke about not being solely dependent on a manager when it comes
yeah,
to deciding how and where and when we will play. And it's nearly impossible to avoid then a simple question. You've spoken of being a product, calling yourself a
yeah,
product, and you've
sure.
spoken of things going back to you. So no matter how many people are helping you going anywhere, I like the African phrase which suggests that it takes a village to build a star, basically, or to raise a child. But let's just go slightly in
Yeah,
a variant. It does take a village to create a star, or shall we say, in this case, a musician who can live from being a musician. So, if we have taken some of the power back, and if we have decided that we are a form of a product and that has to be sold so that we can pay our bills, how do we go about, do you think, doing that, particularly during an age when history has shown us that in the last 10 or 20 years or so, the value of recordings, for example, you mentioned CDs as being a business card. It used to be that having a CD meant that you were a recording artist with a label and had a contract that paid part of your bills. That is not necessarily the case for most of us anymore. So how
yeah.
would you go about deciding what the price is going to be of the product you're selling?
Well, recordings never made money for me. I mean, so I've always seen recordings as something you invest in. I mean, 10 years ago, the CD company would invest in them. They had money, and they'd say, "Let's record Schumann, and even here's a fee, small fee, and you do it." And they put you up, and everything happens. Now, the CD company is really keen to make CDs, but they say we don't have the money. You have to find the money for the to make the master, and then we'll do the rest. So money in recordings is not there, for all the reasons like Spotify and all these streaming platforms that I don't even understand. And I know that the money we make from them is absolutely risible. But I mean, I think there's a chunk of work to be done there. I'm not sure I'm the person to do it, although I could get involved. Where we sort of claw back some of that, and I think it's bad that we're being, in a way, taken to the races, and that millions of people can download our tracks without us making a penny. I mean, how I rationalize it to myself is that I've sort of given, I've sort of accepted for now, at least, that we don't make money from recordings, and in fact we have to find money to make them, but that they recordings then go out there and get us performances, which then, I mean, you do a tour, and then you make your money from your tours, from your performances, from your concerts, your engagements. So that's how I see it. And I think it's only in in historical times, when we had fewer artists and records were a big thing, where people used to make a lot of money from major sales of recordings. But it certainly is a problem, and many people now say the CD as a product is dead. But I don't know what's replacing it. I mean, I don't see people going around with memory sticks, or a little dongle with the. I don't think that has quite the same allure. I think we need. I mean, I'm old-fashioned, but I still think the CD is a thing. I think we need to keep making them. I think there's a place for them, and they help to keep our profile alive. And every performance is unique. So
I think they're a hugely important documentation of what we sound like right now, and it's amazing
exactly, and we
to
leave them
compare
to
recordings from
posterity as well.
beautiful
Yeah,
work. And contemporary
yeah,
composers need to be
yeah,
heard. So
yeah,
for our task is also carrying that kind of music forward in some form. Um,
yeah.
what would you tell audiences watching this? What kind of a giveaway would you offer them when it comes to offering, well, as you say yourself, how can we manage a career in music?
It's just, well, to sum up, like I say, we have the way the way we build our career is a mixture of hard work when we're young and throughout our lives, but remaining open to other forms of music, to other forms of art, to other opportunities, knowing about funding opportunities that are out there, applying for funding, um, because we're always going to have to raise money for our projects. Being in the right place in the right time. Um, Maybe um, competitions, not for everybody, but and not shouldn't be done, you know, 25 a year. But competitions are a very important part of that, and if you are lucky to win one, harnessing any success you have, communicating, being efficient with your administration, and keeping, as I said, keeping it all going, and then perhaps in your 30s and 40s, slightly going sideways into other things, or in your 20s, whenever you like. But being open to getting into whether it can be music therapy or music conducting, or starting a CD label of your own, as you say. There are so many different things we can do, and I think an open mind is really important. The music at the center of it, always remembering why we're here. We are communicators of the music, and following our instincts. And some people get inspiration to start composing, and that's fantastic, and they should do that. I never did that. We will all have to follow the strengths that we have, and that's my
Do you
motto
think
for today.
structure, a daily structure helps? I mean, if we listen to you speak, it sounds like we have to have hours and hours in a day available to us, 24 hours. Wouldn't even go near fulfilling it between practicing, going to concerts, attending friends' performances, and all the things that come with being an artist, overseeing how we are managed, how we are promoted, how we are represented and presented. Would you suggest that we should start as early as possible understanding these things?
I would, and I think it's a vocation and a lifetime, and I go to a concert, that's fun, but I'm also there. I'm being seen, and I could be. You never know who you might meet, and I could get a concert out of going to a concert. So your fun life is also part of your professional life, and to me they're very 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 strongly interlinked. and I never stop being who I am. It's not like I have a sort of 9 to 5 being a pianist, and then I sort of take off that hat and go out and forget myself. And using time, you can do an amazing practice if you do an hour and a half really focused practice. You don't have to do, you know, 8 hours every single day. I mean, Richter famously did about 3 hours a day. Depends on what repertoire you're learning. It depends what needs to be done. Depends if it's quick to learn or slow to learn. So time is flexible, elastic, but certainly I would say to any young people watching this, people in 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, learn a lot of repertoire when you're young, because it goes in so quickly. Learn concertos in case you get engagements that need concertos ready quickly. Build up the repertoire at that young age is really important.
Absolutely. Would you surmise that being a musician nowadays is just very hard work? I mean, I don't know how you feel about it, but do you have the impression that you keep on going long after others have already settled down for a cup of tea, or gotten up a little later than you, or stopped traveling, or whatever it is? Do you work 7 days a week?
No, I feel that my life is a constant holiday.
Is that because you love what you do, Finian?
Yeah, I love what I do, and people get up in the morning and go to the office. I get up in normal times. I get up and I go to the airport and I go and play amazing music with amazing friends, and then get paid and come home and go off somewhere else. And then while I'm on the way on the train, I could be making a schedule for a festival coming up that I've organised, or I could be putting together a program for 2 years down the road. So I think it's fabulous, and I don't think it's hard work. I mean, it is hard work, but it's not. It's hard work that I want to do. It's hard work I've chosen, and it's not drudgery. It's not anything I dread, and I want this coronavirus pandemic to go away very, very quickly so we can get back to it.
Zoltán Kodály, who, as you know, is one of Hungary's foremost pedagogues during his time, and composers and performers, said that he never felt tired. He felt like he was permanently on holiday too. And when people questioned that, saying, well, look, Mr. Kodály, you work so hard, you travel so much, your output is so prolific, he simply said, well, I give my brain a holiday by going from practicing to composing, from composing to teaching, from teaching to doing something else. It's all about music, but at the end of the day, it's all about doing what you love and giving your brain a
Yeah,
rest.
and a change is as good as a rest.
We have a question that has just come in, and I'd love to be allowed to pose it to you, Finian. What is the
Sure.
best advice you have received?
Goodness. Well, I can just right now, without having any preparation, I do remember the night I won the Clara Haskell competition. One of the jury members said to me a bit of advice that I just said to you about 5 minutes ago, and that was, he said, learn as many concertos as you can now, because you need them early on, and have them in your repertoire. So if you're called upon to play, Brahms 2 within a week, it'd be good. The more concertos you have in your repertoire, the more you'll be able to jump in for those amazing experiences that can make your career. If you're ready to jump in and replace somebody really famous when you're young, that's a real career maker. So that's really good advice. Another advice I got from a conductor of the orchestra in Dublin years ago was about negotiating fees. And he said, he said, never be the first to mention a figure. So if they say, what's your fee? You're doing a concert and they say, the promoter says, please let us know your fee. Well, then you shouldn't name a fee. You should let them name a fee. You should try to not to be the person to name the first figure, because then you can say, if you give a fee, well, then they can say, oh, that's grand if it's much less. And then you're stuck. You'll never know.
Taking notes here, Finian.
But if they are the ones to come back to say a fee, well, then you can say, oh, well, that's, then you have more control. So, and my other, never discuss fees over the telephone or Zoom, because you get slightly talking about money that you're going to earn yourself for a performance. I always get a little bit sheepish and a bit slightly embarrassed. So I always say to people, I'm not going to talk about that. And if it's not something that's going through my management, I say, I'll deal with that on email. I'll send you an email. And then it's much, 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 much easier on email. So that's the other piece of advice about negotiating fees, because you can write down a horrible big figure on email, think about it, and sort of send it off. But sometimes saying it just makes you feel so and it's stupid, because we're worth our fees, and we're worth more than our fees. But sometimes you think you just over the telephone, just difficult. That's my experience.
I have written those down mentally. Snapshot. Thank you very much. Another question that we've been asked for yourself, Finian, is there something you would change on your journey? It's a beautiful question.
It is a beautiful question. God,
Gorgeous question.
who sent that in? And that's something I have to think about on my journey, on my life journey. What would I change? Well, I wouldn't. I'd stop all the flights from Milan in the beginning of March,
Oh.
so we wouldn't have the coronavirus in Ireland. But that's not my journey particularly. Um, what would I change? I don't know. Not a lot. I'm quite happy with my lot in many ways until it all came to a grinding halt. What would I change? I just feel we've won the lottery, being living in this part of the world and having running water and having everything we need really, being able to do what we love doing, being paid for it, having a diverse career, um, working with people that we love, playing music that we love. I can't think of anything I'd change right now.
There's a question from an organisation, I believe, Tap Dance Dublin, who ask, what do you think is the biggest difference for musicians starting a career now versus when you got started?
Well, they have all the social media we didn't have. That can be a good thing or a bad thing because it's such a distraction from life. It's ruining our focus, our minds. It's ruining our concentration. Um, and okay, now we have mindfulness, which we didn't really have 20 years ago. At least I didn't know anything about it. So to counteract that, but back then we life was calmer. We just had landlines and musical instruments, and so we weren't distracted. I just find modern technology is a huge distraction. Maybe that's what I would change in my journey. I would stop all the distractions. We do get distracted, definitely, by all the technology, by all the interferences, by all the interruptions in our lives. And just to switch off and practice without anything disturbing is becoming harder and harder. So that's the biggest difference, I think. Now, also, as I said, I think musicians, in a good way, we have more power because we can, with the internet, we can connect ourselves with people around the world much more quickly. We can, as I say, we can start our own concerts more easily than we could years and years ago. So musicians are more empowered.
I would agree. How do you remain positive during the current pandemic situation? Someone has written.
Well, that's really difficult. Now that's it's been a terrible time, and it's been a time of terrible anxiety for all of us, for all kinds of reasons about our lives, about our health, about the health of our elder loved ones, about our careers. We still don't know, and certainly here in Ireland, we don't know when live concerts will resume. There's talk about the pubs opening. There's no talk about concerts. So it's difficult, very difficult to remain positive. We have to just go day by day, week by week. We have to practice mindfulness. I'm getting into mindfulness for the first time in my life, and try to live in the moment and not worry too much about the past or the future. We only have this breath and the next breath. That's all we have right now. We just have this conversation with you and me, Gwendolyn, and we don't know what comes tomorrow. Yesterday is too late to regret anything. And I think the only way to remain positive during the current pandemic situation is to be mindful, to be grateful for what we had. I keep thinking when I get a bit down, I keep thinking of all the things I've done, of all the I can't say I didn't live life to the maximum when I could. All the places I've went, even in the last 12 months, all the experiences I've had, performances or holidays or meetings or social gatherings, and I miss it terribly. I miss just being able to hug people, all that stuff, and we need it back. But to remain positive, I do think back on wonderful times, and hopefully we remain positive about the future and vaccines and treatments, and we will prevail.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you, Finghin. There's a question that's come in from Tiffany. She writes, Dear Finghin and Gwendolyn, thank you so much for the wonderful seminar, and thank you, Tiffany, for listening in. What for you both is the most rewarding part in being a musician?
Hi, Tiffany. Hope you're doing well. The most rewarding part is being able to play amazing music and perform. To perform something like Schubert's Die Winterreise with a wonderful baritone is just beyond words. And we talk about the emails and the organization and the CDs and the promotion and the tweeting and the and this talk is wonderful, and I love talking, as you can tell. But it's all just to sit down and play something like that music with somebody else, or to play a Schubert sonata or just to be able to get. And that's why I come back to Brahms sextets and string music, which I adore, and sometimes I'm just so jealous because I want to play one of those parts. But to be a pianist and to play some of that music I've just mentioned, or loads and loads and loads of other music, is just a privilege and a joy. And its music is there for the last 200 years, some of it or more, some of it, and just to bring it to life in one moment is just, that's why we're all there. And it's if you don't feel like that about music, and if it doesn't get you just so emotional, then maybe music isn't the career for you, because you just have to be so in it.
Well, Finian, in fairness, you could play the other voices, seeing as you play the violin as well.
Well, my violin playing is very, very rusty at the moment. I
I
should have
think
taken it up during lockdown, really, but there you are.
no. I think that that's actually I would chip in with you there. I love being a musician, all
Hmm.
the ups and downs that go with it. But I think that the lockdown has shown me most how much I miss playing with others, how much music
Oh
sounds.
yeah,
How much,
absolutely.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of beautiful music for solo violin. There's a
Yeah,
lot more for solo piano, but there's a lot for
yeah.
solo violin, and never. I mean, having said that, I'm literally missing the reverberation of the bass. I'm
Oh
missing
yeah.
the vibration and the feeling of
I can
playing with
imagine.
others.
Hmm.
Recently, actually, Finian, walking down memory lane, we're doing a thing for my festival this summer where we're taking out all of the recordings that have been made over the last 12 years or so. And I came across the recording you and I made of Mussorgsky
Hmm.
pictures at an exhibition.
Oh yeah.
And your playing is phenomenal, Finian. And it was just so amazing to listen to this amazing music in a situation I was in. I had been in a place where it was pretty silent. Um, and I haven't been privy anymore to hearing other people practice around me and all those sort of things.
Yeah.
Students as well, a lot of teaching is happening online. And so you're not really around the hustle and bustle, the
That's right.
energy that music making and learning creates. And then just listening to these runs and then the bass, and it was thrilling.
Hmm.
And I think that's what
Hmm.
I would miss most, to answer your question, Tiffany,
Yeah.
as well, about the playing.
Yeah.
Question from Siobhan Smith there, Finian. Your favourite composer?
Hello, Siobhan. My favorite composer. Well, it's very difficult to choose one composer, but I think if I really, 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 really had to choose one composer, it would be Mozart.
Oh,
Yeah,
why?
I just adore.
If I may ask.
Because it's just his melodies and just the simplicity with which the ease, I should say, with which he just you know writes these melodies, and one after the other they just come oozing out of him, and the ease with which he composed his operas, his piano concertos, his string writing, and just yeah, amazing. Così fan tutte or Marriage of Figaro. I mean, you just cannot beat.
Thank you. Mark Finucane writes, thanks for the seminar. What's your favourite piece slash concerto slash symphony, etc. of classical music?
These questions are impossible. There's so much stuff out there to choose, and like one piece that I listen to constantly during lockdown, and is one of my favorite pieces, is the Mendelssohn Octet for strings. I love big string pieces, and the Mendelssohn Octet, which he wrote as a child. I mean, it's just disgraceful. He was like 14 or something, or 16 or 15 or whatever he was. He was a teenager, and this piece is the first movement in particular has the most extraordinary energy. And every time I went for my jog, I would put it on and listen to it. And so I listened to it over and over and over and over and over again. And my jog was 30 minutes by the end, and this is 30 minutes. And so I knew I was home. And it is so. If you want one piece of music to listen to, Mendelssohn Octet for strings, fabulous, energetic piece, and it's just full of the joys of life.
Yeah, he was 17, and I think what's amazing about Mendelssohn is that
I
he's
was at 70.
completely underestimated. A lot of people forget that he's this incredible prodigy, writing these.
Mendelssohn was the supreme child prodigy of them all, I think. Yeah,
Yeah, and if
unbelievable.
you're interested in octets, not that you've asked me, Finian, but if you are, and big,
Yeah.
lush string music, George Enescu, his octet, he wrote that when he
Oh
was.
yes, I know it exists, but I don't really know it. I must listen to it. Thank you, Gwendolyn.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and it's modelled a little bit on Mendelssohn's octet, and they're a year apart. He too was a what they would have called a portfolio career now. He was composing, playing, and conducting, and
Hmm.
touring himself.
Hmm.
Um, we're
Incredible.
we're slowly coming to the end of our time together. It's been hugely interesting to speak with you. It's very it's nearly it's nearly there's a word for it and I can't think of it now. Um, it's so unusual to be speaking to you in this manner on Zoom, particularly because we
I
usually
know.
work side by side and also creating this international master course. We've sat for hours side by side going over schedules and listening to participants and deciding programs together. In fact,
I
tomorrow we
know.
should be playing our first concert.
That's right.
And this whole week we would have had concerts in the National Concert Hall. A gorgeous program together with Gary Hoffman and Kim
Hmm.
Kashashian and Gilles Lapap. Um, and I was very excited actually to listen to them teach.
I
Um,
know, but we can still do that a little bit online. I think it's wonderful that all three of them, and what a fabulous faculty they are. I think it's wonderful that they've all agreed to do some online coaching and seminars like this one. And so, bring on the next item. I say it's going to be fascinating, and it's terrific to have them online this week.
That's right. I'm actually looking forward in an hour and a half from now, 4:30, Gilles will start his violin masterclass with some amazing Irish talent as well as international talent. There'll
Mm.
be pieces by Isaïe, for example, being played as well. And I'm very interested to see how he's going to talk about his Mozart cadenzas. Speaking of Mozart, Finian, he's also a
Yes.
huge fan of Mozart and he's well known for making cadenzas all his own. For those listening at the moment, if you're interested and not familiar with Gilles, if you Google or YouTube indeed Gilles Lapap Mozart cadenza, you'll see some of the most astounding things going on out there that he's created.
Mm.
And you're going to be teaching as well this week, Finian.
Yes, Thursday morning I have a class with three wonderful young pianists. Two pieces by Chopin and some Liszt. I will be doing it again on Zoom, which is not ideal for a piano masterclass, but we'll do our very best and try and give the young men some tips and some forward motion.
Indeed.
And you're giving a class, Gwendolyn, as well. When is your class?
I am. I'm
Remind me.
teaching a seminar tomorrow, or I'm giving a seminar rather tomorrow.
Mm.
I don't remember by heart when that is, which is I'll just take a look
Mm.
at where I was keeping notes on how to negotiate my fee better. It's at midday tomorrow. Um,
Midday tomorrow. Yes, I look
and
forward to that. I will be with you for that and look forward to it very much.
that's right. And then a masterclass later this week, and then there's our panel discussion as a group, our faculty discussion on Friday evening. For all of
That's
those
right.
missing those pubs that aren't open yet, it would be great if they could join us with a beer or a tipple of their choice in talking about worldly matters. And it's been quite something to coordinate all these things time zone wise. So thanks again to all of those at the National Concert Hall for making this possible. I'm currently in Switzerland, Finian, you're in Ireland, Kim is in Boston. Gary is, I'm not quite sure, either in Paris or in the US of A, and Gilles is in Florida. So, time zone wise, it's not been that.
California, I thought,
California, thank you, you're right. California, yeah, has an F in
just in
it.
case people are very good at it.
True.
Yeah. But
Finian,
yeah, I would second what Gwendolyn said. We thank very much Kira and Colleen and Nigel and all the team at the National Concert Hall for putting so much work into this and bringing it all online. And so far, so good.
indeed. Thank you very, very much, Finian. It's been a huge, great pleasure.
Well, thank
And I
you,
hope
Gwendolyn.
that people
Thank
have
you.
listened and heard what you have to say because it really is remarkable to see that an artist as prolific in playing and performing as yourself, in fact, is so hands-on and trying to and succeeding in getting a huge amount of innovative projects that are very important off the ground. I was very
Well, thank you
sorry,
so
by the
much,
way,
Gwendolyn.
to hear that your festival was cancelled, your big, big,
Yeah, yes.
huge cello festival.
Mm.
So
Mm.
hopefully that will take place in the future.
We hope so. We do hope so.
Yeah, that'll be wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And yes, so to all of those watching later on this week, we look forward to seeing you. You're very, very welcome to continue posing questions. I will be speaking with Gary Hoffman in detail about his thoughts on everything from technique to how to stay positive during this time to indeed how to manage the great task of teaching and playing and traveling whilst having a family, which is not always the easiest thing to juggle either. So, yeah, hopefully you'll tune in there for that. Thank you, Finian.
Thank you, Gwendolyn.